And if you think about it too, there's if you over a career of however many years or episodes that you do as a podcaster, there's a lot of different subjects. And if you give it a little bit of forethought, in the beginning, if you give it a little bit of forethought and you say, okay, we're going to focus in on this subject matter, right? Whatever that might be, being a mom to teens, right? And have a few of those episodes down, then you have all that content. So you could write a book about being a teen mom, or not a teen mom, being a mom of teens, or a teen mom, and that would do really well as well. But you have all this really great content that you can, definitely repurpose. And just know though that it's not how you speak and do a podcast is different than how you read, how we like to read. So you want to go over those transcripts. So don't just copy and paste the transcript and put it into a book, because that's not going to be a really good book. It needs to be enjoyable to read.
Everyone, welcome back to the How to Podcast series and Living the Next Chapter. How's that? 2 in 1. We could do it both at the same time. Christine Blosdale is here with me. And what is fun for me as the host of a podcast is I get to talk to people that inspire me, that I listen to their shows. I learn so much. I've had this person in my eardrums for so long. And when Christine said yes to coming on my podcast, I'm like, you're joking. You'll come on my show?
Oh my gosh.
Yes. I'm so excited. So I'm holding up a book. It's right here. Your amazing itty bitty podcast book. I am a proud owner of this book, and you need to be as well. It's tiny, but it doesn't need to be big. It's got everything you need in one spot, and you need that. On top of this amazing book, on top of loving podcasting, we both share something else, Christine. Our favorite number. 22.
Yeah.
We both have the same favorite number, so that is awesome. I looked the astonishment.
I know. I was like, "What are you?"
Wait a minute. What the heck? How did you do that? Because I listen to your show and I love your podcast.
Oh my goodness,
Christine, welcome to the show. Nice to have you here.
Thank you so much, David. You know what, Sue? And that book was out a few years ago, so I need to get your contact info directly, and I'll send you my newest book. Okay. Ooh. Which is updated. Okay. So it's a little bit more modern than that.
I still love it though.
And it's not an itty bitty book, but it's not huge. Podcastonomics.
Okay. There you go.
I'll send that to you.
No, you're very
My
kind.
gift to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Well, no, your gift to us is being here. That's your gift.
Oh my goodness.
And it is great to have you here. So yes, for those who haven't met you yet, Christine, they have to. But tell everybody, even despite the sound of your voice, you're in a very unique place in the world, and I'd love to share that as well. Where are you joining us today from?
Well, I was a born and bred American living in California for my whole life, living in Southern California. I am now in New South Wales in Australia, so 7,000 miles away from where I called home for a very long time, and I'm here with my wife and our kids, and it's really lovely. And I do miss aspects of America, though. I miss some American things, but I'm very happy to be here, and it's great with the internet. I mean, my goodness, I could still be with my clients. I could do my podcast shows. I can still communicate with the world, even though I'm very far away from you guys.
Nice. Well, it's great. I'm glad you have time to do this. We're dual purposing this episode because I want to share it with my Living the Next Chapter audience about your books. You have many great resources for people out there. But as well, I want to talk podcasting because you're a great voice in podcasting. You're up on stage, you're leading people, helping people with their shows. I just have a lot of respect for you and how much you give to the community, and to be able to feature you here on the podcast is a joy for me. So again, as a listener of your podcast, I just love the fact that we have a chance to talk. So I'm ready to dive in.
Beautiful.
And talk podcasting. So tell me a little bit about your podcast journey, the early days of it. I know you've done a lot in radio and reporting and interviewing people, but the podcast part, when did that actually kick in for you?
it it came it didn't come late, but it came a little bit late because I had been in radio for 20 years, right? So started off as a writer and then a producer and then a step-in host. That story in Hollywood where they go, the star has broken their leg, you gotta go, you gotta go on stage. It was that kind of thing. You gotta go on the mic. And as soon as I went to that studio and the on-air light went on and I started speaking into a microphone with headphones on, cans, as they say.
Mm-hmm.
I just fell in love with it. I just fell madly in love with the art of the interview and the art of audio and all of that great stuff. And so I sort of, I already had my foot in the door, so to speak, with hosting and doing interview style programming and all that good stuff. But one thing about radio, terrestrial radio, even though it was in Los Angeles, it was a very large audience. Everybody's stuck in traffic, so you'd have a lot of people listening. But what it is that you can have a great, I interviewed Ralph Nader one time, and it was such a good interview, and I really admired him, right? Because I think Ralph Nader why we have like seatbelts and like airbags in our car, right? I mean, so I was a really huge just a fan of his, and so I did interviews like with him and Wangari Maathai, who Wangari Maathai was a Peace Prize winner, and I was all these great programs and interviews. If you heard them in that moment, it was great. But there was really no way. It was just like once it was out there into the not internets, but out there into the airwaves, it was done and it was gone. So it didn't matter if you spoke to, Desmond Tutu or, Deepak Chopra. It doesn't matter. Yeah. It was pretty much there and gone. And only the people that were really in their cars driving could have heard it and appreciated it. And so I heard about this thing called podcasting and how you can have these shows and people can listen to them, anytime that they want. They can actually listen to something from a year ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I really like that. And I like the fact that I would have control of it, not the radio station, and that I could say whatever I wanted to say. Right.
You're right.
That was a lot of creative power. And also because some of the subjects that I would speak about on the radio, sometimes I would get in a little trouble for. So I said, you know what, I'm going to have my own show and I'm going to say my own things. And I was free. I was absolutely free. Yeah. So that's how I started. That's how I got into it. And I think it's been, I don't know the exact day, but I think it's been 8 or 9 years or something like that. I have to go back to the archives and see. And in the beginning, it was horrible. It was my equipment was horrible. I think I had done my first interview through Skype, and it was and I had a speaker and I did have a microphone, but I had a speaker, and so I would ask a question, and then I would kind of angle the microphone towards the speaker and have it was really bad, really, really bad. But it got me going. And the rest is history.
What I love about your amazing Itty Bitty podcast book is you bring out other reasons to fall in love with podcasting beyond what's normally touted as the main reasons to podcast. And I love your connection with like helping small profits and organizations that are trying to raise money, charities. There's a lot of that in the book. I can tell that's important to you. I'm curious as to why it's so important to you to take your podcast and shine a light on other organizations that maybe don't get attention. Why is it so important?
Oh, because exactly like you said, they're not getting attention. Right. A lot of I worked for a nonprofit radio station, radio network, nonprofit, community sponsored, and the community that was sponsoring it were not the Rockefellers. We're talking peaceniks and peace, love, and all that stuff, and really working class, the poor, the people who want peace. So a lot of enthusiasm, but not a lot of money. And with the nonprofit, you have to have that funding. And so my whole thing was to make sure that we were bringing awareness not only the great work that a lot of nonprofits do that is so important and it's not being done, but the work that they do, but also ways to help them get funding. And that's why I also think podcasting is so important for nonprofit businesses of all stripes, but especially nonprofits. If you're doing something really amazing for the world, people need to know about it, and you need to be able to get that funding in. It's absolutely critical.
From your background and the many times that you've been on the mic with guests, can you think about a time when it just solidified for you that this was the right place for you to be in? Like, you had a great conversation with someone, something happened, and you're like, yeah, no, this is where I need to be. And this just confirms and reaffirms that I'm in the right spot. Can anything pop in your mind when you think about that?
I still think back to those early days of, I was refusing. I didn't want to be on the microphone. I was a producer. So I was in the back, and I was like, I didn't want to be, it's like kind of like, I don't want to be on camera, So I was fine writing and getting ideas for the shows and contacting the guests and writing the script out and all that stuff, and being behind the glass, in the control room. And it was just one of those things where the person that was supposed to be on air wasn't, and I got that opportunity, and I got that opportunity many times, and the response from the audience was so amazing, and the feedback was so great, that the people that were at the station were like, oh, this is a good thing. Let's keep her. Let's have her do that. They were like, oh, she's a producer and a host. We could get more work out of her. But it was that thing. It was that there's and it's between radio and podcasting. It is the same thing. A lot of times you do not have that audience feedback. So you don't have that immediate, you don't know who's listening to you. And it's the same thing with radio. I could be speaking into a microphone. I know that, the listenership, it could be thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, but you never know who's exactly listening to you. And if they agree with you or if they don't agree with you, or they're like, shut up, lady, driving in their car. But with same thing with podcasts, you don't know who is actually listening to you. And the greatest thing was when I was able to go to a public event and have people come up to me and say, oh my gosh, I've been listening to you for years, and you've inspired me, you've helped me, you've motivated me, you're just, all that feedback is really important. And a lot of times especially podcasters, we don't get that feedback that often. That's why it was so lovely when I first spoke to you to know that you've listened to the show and you get it. It's like being a writer. It's like being a writer of a book. And when somebody says, I loved your book, I thought it was really funny, or, I got that message that you were putting out there. It's the greatest feeling in the world, because someone is understanding and getting what it is you're putting out there. So, I think it was just from the early days of that connection to the audience without connecting to them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
I want to take a sidestep. I mentioned at the beginning when I introed you that you and I share a fascination and a love for the number 22. Mm-hmm. So I know my part of my story of why I love the number 22, but I heard you talk about it on a podcast. I wrote it down right away, top of my page. Ask her about 22. Why is that number stand out for you? I'm curious.
You know what? I don't know. It's just a magical number to me. And when I was little, my brother is 9 years older than me, so there's quite a big age gap. And so I always felt kind of like the only child growing up, right? And I was with my grandmother a whole lot, but I remember he had a jersey, a football jersey, and it had the number 22 on it, and I was drawn to that thing like crazy. Like I don't know why. I just thought it was magical. And so growing up, whenever I was in sports or, anytime I had the opportunity to wear number 22, I did that. And then I've got a tattoo on my arm of 22 as well, because I just
see.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't even know why. What's your story with 22?
See, there you go. That was a year of change for me when I was 22. it's kind of a Taylor Swift thing, I guess. I don't know. But anyways, for me, it's like when I met my partner, I graduated from school, a lot of life change, a lot of monumental moments in that 1 year that redirected and focused my future.
Wow.
And brought great people into my life. And it just all seemed to happen in that 1 year. And so for me, 22 is just the number. Same as you. I can't escape it.
Yeah.
So when you said it, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's someone else like me out there. And talk about connecting with your audience, right?
Yeah.
Like for you, it was maybe kind of a little throwaway comment in your podcast, but it resonated with me.
Yeah.
And connected me to you. And I think that's another power of podcasting, is that we can make a connection with somebody. And it might seem trivial in the moment to say like, oh, I like the number 22, and off we go on to the next topic. But there's someone that perks up and goes, hang on, wait a minute.
Yeah.
That's me. So when I listen to you on the show, it's like, Christine, I hear myself in you. I identify with you. You're my voice when I don't have one. And I'm cheering you on because you're saying the things I want to say as a listener.
Right.
And it's amazing that bond that you get between a listener and a host. What does that mean to you to have that bond?
It is a very intimate art form.
Yeah.
And I remember from one reason why I love audio, and I do vodcast too. I do the video versions of the podcast, like we're doing right as well. So I do that, and that's great because people can see you and they can look in your eyes and they can go, okay. But the great thing about audio, if it's a radio program or if it's a podcast, is you don't see the person, so you only hear them and feel them, and you're not judging them based on, oh, I wonder why she wore that sweater today, or how come her hair is so short, or what's up with the nose piercing, or what is there's no judgment. There's no, oh, the color of her skin or the this or that. Right. So they're only listening to your voice and feeling your intention. And I found that to be extremely powerful. And that's why I've always been, since the moment I got on that microphone 25 years ago, whatever, I've been very aware of the responsibility. Right.
Yeah.
And never, ever have I gone on the air and made it really about me. It's about the show. It's about the guest. It's about the audience. It's about what we can do to make, people's lives a little bit better or change the world. But it's, because I've heard programs, podcasters, and radio hosts who have an ego, and then that ego comes through the airwaves, and it is the biggest ick.
Right.
It will turn off more people than you know. And that's not, for me, that's not what I'm here for. For me, I'm here for more than that. It's not about me, is what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've written a book as well that helps talk about getting on podcasts as guests and all that. From your perspective, what are you seeing in podcasting for guesting? Are you seeing some successes? Are you seeing some things that you're like, oh, I wish we could do that better? What's kind of standing out for you in the podcast guesting space?
Well, with my coaching clients, with my clients that come in two categories, really. So people who want to create a podcast to promote their business, their wisdom, to talk about their experiences, or just to inspire people. So there's those that want to create their own podcast, and I help them through that step by step, doing all that stuff. But then there's others who are like, I don't want to create a podcast. I don't really need to do any of that, but I would like to be a guest on podcast show, right? And so I help them through that process. And part of that is knowing how to present yourself and to communicate that message to the world through your voice as much as possible, right? So so I do work with them on that. And a lot of times people are sometimes they're very shy and nervous about speaking on their expertise. And I'm like, first of all, don't focus on you. Don't focus on how you sound or how you look. Don't focus on you. Focus on the audience. Focus on that person that's listening, that you can help them, right? You can change their life in some way. And that helps people with the nerves, the people who are nervous and scared about being on a show, because it's the audience is who you want to focus in on, not so much how you look and sound.
What about our insatiable desire to have big numbers to prove our worth? I challenge that a little bit in my podcast because I want people to understand that a number's a number, a person is a person. And one of the quotes I really have kind of adopted into what I do revolves around an apple. And the quote is basically along the lines of, you can count the number of seeds in an apple, but you can't count the number of apples in a seed. So even though you have one listen to your podcast, that's not a sign of failure, because that one person could have connected with you, learned something, changed a behavior, seen the world differently, now treated their partner differently.
Yeah.
Shown up better as a parent for their kids, which then has an impact beyond the one listen that you're lamenting over. You have the power to change history and the future, all with one listen. Yeah. So I kind of challenge this insatiable thirst for a high number to prove that my podcast is worthy. And when I have people come on my show and they're like, I'd love to come on your podcast, how many listeners do you have? It's kind of like a default question. And I'm like, do you understand the power of podcasting? That you can connect with somebody, right? So how do we battle that? How do we raise the connection piece for our guests to understand how powerful this medium really is in relation to other forms of media? How do we show them that one listen really matters?
I'll tell you this. The thing is that we never know. We never really truly know who's listening to us, right? If you're having a show, if you have a program too that is educational, inspirational, motivational, and it's not just you talking, dookie, right? This is what I had for lunch. This is what I had for dinner, and I don't know. Yeah. But I mean, you're actually providing something of value. You never really know who's listening. And I always say that sometimes it's like speaking into a vacuum a lot of times. But if you do every single episode as if your audience, just imagine whoever your favorite person is, whoever you look up to, if it's I don't know, if it's a teacher, if it's a historical figure, if it's a celebrity, whoever that you really look up to and admire, if you record every single episode as if they are going to be listening to it, you will notice too your level of you rise up, right? And the reason why I say this is because before I was even in radio, I was a writer and I wrote for America Online. I was one of the lucky ones in the very, 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 very beginning to have a column, and it was a daily column, and it was an entertainment column, and I wrote through a cartoon character. Right. It wasn't Christine Blosdale. It was Beatbox Betty. And Beatbox Betty was this vampy, hedda hopper, martini toting, kooky lady who was funny, who was really funny and honest. Right. And so I wrote through this cartoon character for about a year and a half. And AOL loved it because it was a very popular column, right? It was like one of the most popular columns. So they were like, yay, okay, go, Christine, keep giving us your stuff. Keep giving us your stuff. And one day I was, I never knew how I was really doing with AOL audience, really, other than the numbers. And one time I was out at dinner with a friend, and sitting at a table was Lily Tomlin and Jane Wagner. And Lily Tomlin is like I think she's amazing. Yeah. And so my friend was like, go over there and say something. Go over and say hi. Introduce yourself. I was like, oh, I don't want to be that person. Right. Well, they're in mid-bite to go over there. And they just kept egging me on. And I said, oh, okay. God, I hate doing this. And I sheepishly walked up to the table. I said, hi, Lily. Hi, Jane. I just want to say you're amazing, you're amazing, and I really appreciate you. And I made sure I really looked at Jane too, because everybody looks at Lily. Nobody
Yeah.
nobody knows that Jane is like the writer, like, she's
Yeah.
brilliant.
Right.
And they said, thank you. What's your name? And I said, well, it's Christine, but I also go by the name of Beatbox Betty. And they put down their forks and they looked at me, and Lily looked at Jane, and Jane looked at Lily, and I think it was Jane said, Beatbox Betty. And then Lily goes, we think you're so funny. Oh my gosh, it's so nice to meet you. We think you're so funny. And I thought I was being punked. Like,
Yeah.
like,
Where's the cameras?
like, are you cruel girls? like, what kind of horrible game is this? No, but they had been reading the columns, right? And I did not know that. In my little dungy apartment in Los Angeles, in the middle of the night, because the deadline was like super early in the morning. But you don't know. So you never, ever know. But when you write content, or your blogs, or you're doing a podcast, or you're doing videos or whatever, and if you put that in your mind that you don't really know, but it could be somebody that is really magical in your life, and somebody that later on I actually got to talk to Lily and got to meet her, brought her into the radio station, and she's a lovely, lovely lady. And worked with her a little bit, but you just never know, and that's the thing. So the problem with beginner podcasters, the issue is that like 90% stop after the first like 7 episodes.
Yeah.
Like, so they're excited. It's like having a new puppy. They're excited about the puppy.
Yeah.
We're going to love the puppy. We're going to take lots of pictures with the puppy. And then as the puppy turns into a dog, then it's like, well, I'm not going to walk that dog. I'm busy. I got things to do. What is the dog doing for me? How many people are looking at my dog? Right.
I don't make any money walking my dog.
Yeah. I don't make any money walking my dog. But 7 episodes. And that's not enough. That's not enough to get out there. It's just, that's sad that so many people stop after 7. But and you have to be passionate about it. You have to be passionate about wanting to create that content and express yourself, or to have a platform for other people speaking.
Yeah, I love it. So talk a little bit more about your author journey. It's one thing to write for a column. It's another thing to write for other people, but now you're really writing for yourself. Your name's on there, and your books are out in the world. What does that mean to you to take your podcast knowledge and everything you've learned over your career and then start writing books? What's that leap like for you? I'm sure you've learned a lot about yourself in the process of writing your books.
I'm a creator. I think that's what also the number 22 is. I think there's something about it, about the like the giving tree, right? The creation tree. So I like to, I'll get bored if I just don't do anything. So I like to create, and I'll come up with different ideas on things. But with me, one of my earlier experiences that I had with a publisher wasn't the best, right? And I wasn't super happy about not being able to know what my rankings were, or what my royalties were, or anything like that. And I'm a control freak. That's why I was a producer for so many years. I like to have control of things. So that's when I started doing self-publishing. And self-publishing was I said, oh my gosh, you mean I can publish my own book and see my stats and become a best-selling author on my own? Like, really? And yes. And it is possible. It's possible for everybody, anybody at this moment in time with technology, that you can become a best-selling author. And so that's been my thing, that's my challenge to myself. I'm like, let me see if I can get there. And with Podcastonomics, the book for beginner podcasters, that is really like all my coaching, the workshops that I've done. I've just put it all together in that. And wanted to have something that people would be inspired so that they go beyond those 7 episodes, right?
Yeah.
So it's something that they can turn to and they can go, oh, that's a great idea. It's to give them ideas on what to do as well.
Yeah.
So I love that. I love writing. And there's more books that I've got. I tell podcasters too, I say, you're a podcaster, but you can be an author. And all those episodes that you have that are in the tank, they can be used, repurposed and into chapters in a book. You just need to be smart about it and know how to do it. And if you have a guest, you better make sure you have a guest release form. but
yes.
if you want to use it for future material. But yeah, we're all sitting on tons of best-selling books. It's just fun to do it. It's a challenge.
Right. And it's to record it back to the radio comment where it goes out into the world and it disappears. Podcasting is evergreen, but we create an episode, we put it out in the world, and then we kind of never reference it again. It's nice to revisit that, use that information and repurpose it, let it have another life beyond the episode itself.
Absolutely.
I like that. I love that idea. Yeah.
And if you think about it too, there's if you, over a career of however many years or episodes that you do as a podcaster, there's a lot of different subjects. And if you give it a little bit of forethought, in the beginning, if you give it a little bit of forethought and you say, okay, we're going to focus in on this subject matter, right? Whatever that might be, being a mom to teens, right? Yeah. And have a few of those episodes down, then you have all that content. So you could write a book about being a teen mom, or being a mom of teens, or a teen mom. And that would do really well as well. But you have all this really great content that you can, definitely repurpose. And just know though, that it's not how you speak and do a podcast is different than how you read, how we like to read. So you'll want to go over those transcripts. So don't just copy and paste the transcript and put it into a book, because that's not going to be really good book. It needs to.
So
to read.
Who's filling your cup right now? Like, who are you looking to and listening to or consuming their content? And you're just like, oh, every time I come to this creator and I consume what they're doing in the world, it just fills me up and puts me in a good space. Who are you kind of following along behind right now?
I was a little late in the game, but I am a huge TikTok fan. And so
Good.
I get a lot of inspiration and information and I get very inspired through TikTok, because I think there's some really creative people there. So I will go in there, and also I'll create my own content. I'll create some videos. Some are related to podcasting. A lot of them are not. A lot of them are just like a day in the life type thing, silly, goofy stuff that I do. And me and my wife and our adventures and things like that. But I like it because it's an equalizer. And, just like a podcast, with TikTok, all you need is your phone. Yeah. And there are some really creative people out there. And there's some very brave folks as well. There's some silly things going on there as well. Yeah. But the algorithm is such that once you start, that's why I just tell people, I said, be careful when you're using TikTok, like where you stop and land and watch, because then that's what you're going to be fed, right? Yeah. So if you stop and watch a cute little kitty video of the cat,
you're going to
be inundated with cat videos. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, TikTok is I love it. I do. I'm addicted to it.
Yeah. I've been listening to Mel Robbins' podcast, and one thing I like about what she does, when she has a guest on her show, she'll ask a question, the guest will answer it, and then she'll pause the guest, and she'll turn to you, the listener, and kind of recap the last answer, speak to you in the moment about what just happened and what was just said, and the guest is kind of like on pause, and she's talking to me as a listener, like she brought me into the conversation. And I'm like, what a great moment to feel like I matter in this conversation, even though I wasn't there during the recording. It's a really interesting way of doing that. And then she comes back to the guest, and it's just like, she talked to me. Like, I think that's one thing maybe as podcasters we can probably do more of and kind of be conscious of, is there's a listener that's going to hear this.
Yes.
A week from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, they're going to hear us having this conversation. And how do we bring them in so that they're actually part of what we're saying, and talk to them as if they're actually in the room? So one of my advice that I give to guests is, when you come on my show, I'm going to ask you a question about how you wrote the book or how you did the thing. And the person that's listening is at the beginning stages, and they would love to learn from you. So instead of talking through me to them, Dave, I would say to your listener, instead just talk to them because they're here. I'm going to go sit with the audience and listen to the answer. Yes. But they're right here, so let's talk to them.
Yes.
Address them. You know,
That's
and I
beautiful.
just love that bond again, right?
Yeah.
That we can have with our listeners. You can't duplicate that in radio because it's kind of very transactional. It's very, you're jumping in halfway through a conversation. You kind of miss the beginning. Podcasting always starts at the start, and you bring people along in the conversation from the beginning. And I think that's an advantage that we can leverage as podcasters.
Absolutely. And it's your show. So it's, that's the beautiful thing. Whereas on a radio show, you've got a clock. It's like when they say take a break, they're like, take a break. You got to take a break and you got to wrap it up. If you're having a great conversation with somebody with your own podcast show too, you can go into depth. One of the things that I think that a mistake that some beginner podcasters make is the idea that they need to fill.
Yeah.
Right? They need to fill. There can't be any dead space, dead air. And that's simply not true. That some of the most magical moments can be captured with that pause, with that moment of thought, or when someone says something that's really powerful, that you don't just jump right back in, that you actually go, whoa, whoa, what did you just say? Those moments I think are really magical. And I love Mel. Mel Robbins is a great example. People should listen to her and watch her as well.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yes.
I had someone on my author podcast, and they wrote a book about their traumatic brain injury. And one of the things they're dealing with post-traumatic brain injury is that they have to think about their answers. So they don't think in complete sentences all the time, and they actually have to stop, refocus, and then answer the question again. And I knew that up ahead of time because we had a pre-interview chat. And I asked a question of my guest, and they started their answer, and then they paused. You could count 1, 2, 3, and then they're back. Now, I can throw my podcast through one of those tools that will erase all those blank spaces and make my podcast concise and, get rid of all that dead space. But later on in the conversation, about halfway through, 3/4 of the way through, she said she actually talked about the fact that she has to pause and think about what she does because of what had happened to her. Now, if I had taken that out of the conversation, those dead spaces where she was thinking and processing, none of that would have made sense.
Right.
Because I would have removed all that. And as she listened back to it, it wouldn't have been who she is.
Right. Exactly.
And that would have been true to her. Right. So just think about what you're doing, and maybe in your editing processes and all the things you do, think about what the end result is for the benefit of your guest as well.
I love that. That's really powerful as well. I would have even taken that little snippet of what she's talking about that, and even bring it forward, like in the very, very beginning before you actually do the intro, the show bumpers and all that stuff. So that people who are just starting to listen to it will understand that too. And that then they're even more invested. They're like, oh my goodness. Okay. This is important to actually hear what she's saying as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was really good that you did that. That was, being true to her.
Yeah. I guess as we wrap up, Christine, the one thing I'm thinking of in podcasting land that I'm really on a mission to help encourage, back to your idea around coaching and not judging somebody by how they look or sound, is that, again, I kind of reference back to those 2 TV shows, American Idol and The Voice. Where American Idol, you have judges who sit behind a table and they make judgment of you, whether or not you're good enough to move forward into the next round, sometimes saying maybe some mean things in the process about you not being ready or you should never do this. And then you compare it to The Voice, where their backs are turned to you, you come onto the stage, you do your thing. There's no prejudgment. They're not looking at how you look. They just go by your voice. Mm-hmm. And then they make a decision to have you on their team. If they turn their chair, great. If they don't, they all turn their chairs. And they all give you coachable moments to help you be better at what you're doing. And they invite you back to come back on the show again. And I just think in podcasting, when I listen to you, I don't get the crossed arms behind a chair judgment vibe from you by any means. I get the coaching vibe. I get there's room for you in podcasting and we need you. And here's how you can be better. But you need to start. And if you don't start, you'll never improve. So I get that from you. Every time I listen to your show, read your books, you're just there to serve and coach people. How can we reduce the amount of gatekeepers in podcasting that kind of stand in the way of new podcasters and say, you have to do it this way or you're doing it wrong? I just want to open the doors. There's so many people with so many great stories that we need their voice in podcasting. And just because you don't fit their example of what podcasting is, does not mean there's not a space for you. I'm trying to break that down. Less judgment, more coaching, more support.
Yeah.
And again, having you on this show today is a win for me because I really do admire what you do in podcasting. So talk to us. How do we reduce the judgment and increase the coaching and the acceptance in podcasting?
Well, first of all, don't listen to those people.
Mm-hmm.
There's an easy way to create a podcast and there's a hard way, right? And a middle ground. What I always tell people is you don't need to have the most expensive equipment. You don't need to have the fancy latest this or that. There's the basics, right? And a decent microphone is really important. If you're doing video versions of your podcast, of course, a decent camera, right? Because people want to be able to see you. But really, the most important thing is the passion that you have and whatever the message is. It's the same thing with marketing in general. When what is it that you want to give the world, or what is it that you want to put out into the world? The next important thing is to realize that the judgment or the self-judgment or the imposter syndrome is a real thing. It happens to people. And so it stops them from getting on the microphone. It stops them from sharing their message. Who am I to think that I can blah, 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 blah. It's not about that. Think about the audience. Think about who is listening to you, and you may never know, but the impact that you can have. That's the most important thing. It's not so much. And here's the other thing. You don't have to do a podcast for years and years and years and years. You can do a 12 episode series. You can,
right.
It's like a true crime podcast or an autobiography, of Princess Diana. It doesn't go on for years and years and years. It's, she's born, this has happened, this is that, and that's it. There's 12 episodes. Yeah. So I tell people too, you can do a podcast that is not life consuming and it's going to take you years and years and years to do. It's just like chapters in a book. So you can do 12 episodes or 15 episodes or 10 and wrap it up in a beautiful little package and make that be your gift to the world. But the idea of being judged by others and then our own self-judgment, self-critical, those things will stop you every single time. And you never know until you do. It's one of the most affordable ways it's one of the most affordable ways to get your message out into the world. So I talk about people when they have a business too, or a coaching or a consulting program. I'm like, it's great advertising. Just don't make it sound like an infomercial.
Right.
Whatever you do.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's not a sham wow commercial. Come on, people.
No.
Let's get in there.
No.
Give value all the time.
Exactly.
I love it.
Exactly.
And that's why I love having you on the podcast, Christine, because that's all you do. It's just value all the time. So to that point, to buy the books, to be part of the podcast, to listen to all your shows, which I have. Where do we go, Christine? How do we connect with you?
The easiest way is to go to my website. I have links to everything there, all the different I have two podcasts that are in production, a third that I'm working on. It's just christineblosdale.com, or you can go to expertauthoritycoach.com. But christineblosdale.com has everything, links to the books and all that good stuff. And also, if I have any free workshops that are coming up, they'll be listed there at the website as well.
I love it. Christine, Thank you so much for taking time to do this.
Thank you, David.
All the best to you and your family, and cheering you on over here in Canada. You have a big fan here in Canada, so
awesome.
It's great to meet somebody that inspires me and keeps me podcasting. So it's really great to have you on the show. It really means a lot.
That makes my heart explode, David. Thank you.
Everyone, all the information's in the show notes as always. Please go and support an amazing podcaster and someone who just gives. And if you haven't caught on to that by now, you will as you listen to more and more of Christine's podcasts and everything she does. Christine, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks for listening to Living the Next Chapter. I'm glad you stayed all the way to the end. You're my new bestie. And the one thing I like to do with my besties is enjoy time together over a cup of coffee. Now, one thing missing in the equation is my coffee cup is empty. And what I would love if, after 390 plus episodes roughly, if you found any value in the podcast and you want to say, hey, Dave, do you need a refill of your coffee cup? I'm looking at it right now, and you know what? It's looking kind of sad. There's not much in the coffee cup. If you want to help support the podcast, I would love you forever as besties and celebrate coffee with you. You can celebrate and support the show at our website using our Buy Me a Coffee link. And all the money goes back into the podcast. And we also like to give it to other podcasters. So if you want to support the show, head over to livingthenextchapter.com and let's top it up. Thank you guys. Thanks for listening. Cheers.